most importantly, on how you see the situation, first of all, in the Arab-Israeli question, and Secretary Kerry's efforts towards brokering some kind of peace there, and then secondly, the situation in Syria. I suppose that would be the two first things we'd want to hear about.
Let me address those very quickly, and I think on both counts, there's something different from when I was doing this as a diplomat. We support Secretary Kerry's efforts to get the Israelis and Palestinians to negotiate and reach a deal over the next 9 months. And we will continue to support that. Everybody I know thinks the Americans are serious. Not only the Secretary, but also the President. And that's a big asset. When people think you're serious, they know you can provide tremendous support, and they also know that there can be a lot of pain there if you don't respond seriously. So it leads to serious negotiation. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to succeed, but these negotiations are serious. And they're serious because of, and I'm going to be very candid with you, because of the approach that the Secretary has taken. He's determined, seriously determined, and he keeps after this repeatedly. So I'm impressed, frankly. I'm not yet ready to be euphoric and we have a deal. We're far from that. But yes, there's a new tone and new temperament in this process.
Extraordinary, if I may say, just as a practical matter, an extraordinary travel schedule. He seems to show up everywhere all the time.
Exactly. And not only that, I can tell you, he's on the phone continuously. Mm-hmm. So there's something happening here. We will see whether it's going to be a major disappointment or not, or a major success, but it's serious. But the problems are difficult, so let's not become too optimistic too quickly. The other side of it, Syria, and all the way down to the Gulf. Syria is a geopolitical battle. There are more people fighting in Syria that are not Syrian, fighting around the Syrian issue, that are not Syrian than there are Syrians. A lot of different parties. If you look, we had a meeting of the Friends of Syria group yesterday. All of the Gulf was there. Turkey was there. All of the West was there. We were there. They didn't invite the Iranians, but they're part of the debate on Syria. So there is this geopolitical competition on Syria. Then you have the sectarian issues that relate to the Syrian problem. Then you add to that the issue of a governance deficit and the desire of the Syrian reformers to have a more democratic system. Then you add to that international terrorism. It's a mess, to say the least. It's going to be a tremendous challenge. And its implications will have ramifications down to the Gulf, into Lebanon, possibly in Jordan. So this is a regional challenge, really. What we do in Egypt will affect both of those issues, the peace process and the Syrian dimension. In all honesty, the Palestinians and the Israelis will face very serious questions about Jerusalem, territory, security, refugees. They're going to be very difficult for both of them to answer. Traditionally, the idea is the U.S. brings in Israel, and the Arabs, especially the Egyptians, bring in the Palestinians. When the going gets tough, the Palestinians will need us. And if we therefore settle and regain our role, that will help the peace process tremendously. Same applies in Syria. We have a less traditional role there, but as we settle and once again become the kernel, the beacon of the Arab world, you bring up again the nationalistic trend versus the sectarian trend. And if we can get back to we are nation states rather than Muslims, Christians, Shia, Sunnis, and so on, then you move the debate back into traditional state-to-state politics. And I think that will help push back the sectarian divide a little bit. Without it, if we end up dividing Syria on a sectarian basis, that's a recipe for destroying the whole region.
Right. I think you make a convincing case that restoring Egypt to a level of political and economic normalcy can have beneficial side effects in the region.
I believe so.
As a whole. What about Europe in all of this? I mean, they often talk about how they're the second or the equal to the largest economic bloc in the world. They're staring at North Africa geographically just across the sea. What reactions and what assistance and what relationships have you had with them since you assumed your office?
Well, first of all, they are, as you said, right across the sea. So logically speaking, they should have a tremendous interest, as we do, in what's happening in Europe. Historically, they haven't played a strong political role, but have played a stronger economic role. I would love to see Europe much more aggressive in capacity building in North Africa and the Middle East. I don't want the world to make us more Italian or more French or more Dutch. I want them to help us become better Egyptians. And that's all about education, about capacity building, about training, about youth. If they do that, they will have very stable neighbors. And if they don't, then you're going to have an economic platform that is very volatile with ramifications on the northern Mediterranean, if not the eastern Mediterranean. I can't imagine that Europe will suddenly become a political superpower just because it's so complicated to manage that. But they've played, for lack of a better, well, they've played they've had interesting changes. Let me just give you two examples. On the issue of Israeli settlements in the West Bank and Gaza, mostly in the West Bank, they took a position that we support the negotiations, but if products are produced in the settlements in the West Bank, we won't buy them. Or there's an additional tax to them. There's some restriction in terms of if it's inside Israel, it's fine. But if it's in occupied territories, then it needs more scrutiny. It's an interesting political step. It's very smart, and I think it's a very useful political tool. It's not, we're going to force the solution on you, but there's a consequence to the actions. And they attempted, with the Americans, they attempted to help get us to solve our problems about a month and a half ago. That didn't work. Not because they had the wrong idea, but basically because the Egyptian parties weren't ready yet. And I don't think the European parties completely understood the chemistry that existed between the Egyptian parties. So they seem to be moving more and more into a political role, but it's not going to anywhere in the near future be the exclusive or the decisive role.
So we're coming towards a close here and we're running out of time. Perhaps I can go back to the opening of our discussion where I talked about the theme of this conference being youth empowerment. One of the related themes has been the issue of fostering public-private partnerships. Could you tell us a little bit about how much credence or how much currency the idea of public-private partnerships has in Egypt, and whether you see any opportunity for perhaps some public-private partnerships from abroad playing some kind of a role in your country?
I don't think we can develop to our full potential without public-private partnerships. We need to grow at least 8 to 10% a year for at least the next 8-9 years, and have the distribution of that dividend much more efficient than was in the past. And we can't simply reach those figures unless we have both the private sector and the public sector working together. And it will be generated most of all by the private sector, with the public sector, quote unquote, the government, helping with the infrastructure. So it's imperative for our future that we do that. 3 years ago, we were really embarking on an aggressive public-private partnership program. With the two revolutions, people have been quite hesitant about selling off assets or getting into significant partnerships. But I see this as the future as well. I mean, once we get this process settled, and this 9-month program is already 2.5 months over. So within the next 6 months, this program will, the time frame will have been over. Even though a significant part of it is domestic public-private partnership, but the same thing applies to foreign partnership. We started that in the past in the energy sector, oil refineries, petrochemical projects, electricity at a certain point in time. So the possibility is there to do this. And it's not the possibility, it is imperative if we're going to move forward. Our economy is not large enough to depend only on the public sector. And the public sector is too large for it not to be part of the growth of the economy.
Mm-hmm. So, do you have any parting comments that you'd like to make before we wind up the conversation?
Well, yeah, of course I do.
Well, I just want to be sure there was nothing
sure.
you had failed to say
I mean,
that you wanted to say.
I'm honestly very proud to be an Egyptian. It's been a volatile 2.5 years, but I'm very proud to see Egyptians waking up and engaging in public politics, in the public domain. I'm very proud of the youth. They're the ones who did this. They're the future. I will not underestimate the challenges, because we need to provide them the space, the assets, the stability. But this is a country it's waking up. There will be tremendous potential there, and I encourage you not only to visit, but to invest there.
Well, Nabil Fahmy, Foreign Minister of Egypt, I think I speak for everybody in this room when I say we wish you the very best in your future endeavors, and thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, John.